It's Reality Check with Craig Price.
I'm an idiot.
4 minutes in and I'm already wrong.
I'm like a monkey. Hello, look at me.
You're like a beautiful mind. I'm more like Forrest Gump.
So it's,
Craig Price is the man.
I knew it. Craig, shut up.
It's Reality Check with Craig Price. This week, Alan Stevens joins me from England to talk online reputations. Welcome to the podcast. Hope you enjoyed your holiday weekend and the week off. I spent my day at jury duty, saddened by what society considers peers. I hope you never get accused of a crime and it goes as far as a courtroom jury. You're in trouble. Anyway, before we get to this week's guest, a quick reminder for anyone going to the National Speakers Association Convention, Influence 2015. I will be presenting Podcasting Your Influence. See what I did there? Using podcasts to share your expertise on Celebrity Sunday, July 19th at 4:30 in Delaware B, which is on the lobby level. I'll be sharing my thoughts on finding the perfect podcast format for your message, schedule, and personality, discovering what the purpose the podcast will have for your business, and talking about why podcasts succeed or fail. I'll also put a person or two in the hot seat and see if we can find a perfect format for their new podcast. It will be recorded for, yes, you guessed it, a future podcast, but please come and join me. Presenting the speakers is no picnic, and I will need all the support I can get. But on to this week's guests. We all have to deal with our online reputation, even if we're not famous or one of those internet sensations who have 1 million followers for no apparent reason. You know, with all the division online, people's quickness to be offended and complain, we can really get into trouble quickly. Thankfully, my friend and colleague is here to help us put it into some perspective. So log out of Facebook, stop arguing on Twitter just long enough to learn about managing your online reputation with Alan Stevens. Online reputation usually only, for a lot of people, they only think about it in celebrity terms. You know, it's really the only time you have to protect your reputation is when a politician says something stupid or does something stupid or a celebrity posts something. So as an individual, you know, we may never know how our reputation is out there in the world, especially online. How can we gauge, you know, how much our reputation is out there and how important is it?
Well, it's out there whether you think it is or not, Craig. That's the whole point. We've all got a reputation. We've all got a reputation online and offline. But as far as your online reputation goes, you never know who's looking at your posts. You never know who's looking at your rants. And you never know who you're engaging with, really. So all of that, and, you know, as you know, the saying goes, your reputation precedes you, and it certainly does. And it also follows you around. So all of us have an online reputation. We all have a perception in the minds of people who follow us online or read our posts or read our blogs. And you can do something about it. You can you can manage it. You can make it better. But it's there whether you like it or not.
Well, like I said, for me, I don't have to worry about it too much. I mean, I still try to do the best I can. But if you were to Google Craig Price, you know, you have to go through 2 pages of serial killer in Rhode Island before you get to me.
I thought that was you.
No, well.
Oh, no, okay.
Yeah, no. We look almost completely in exactly the opposite. But my reputation, like I don't have a lot of followers online. You know, my reputation that I'm aware of, and this is why I think it's important that people know that it's out there no matter what. But the reputation I know that I'm aware of is really only amongst the people that I interact with on a regular basis, and I don't really ever think about it much farther than that because I don't really see any evidence of it.
I mean, that's a fair point, Craig, but what you've got to bear in mind as well, that if a potential new client comes along or a new colleague or somebody who wants to get to know you, the first thing they're going to do is go online. They're going to look for your LinkedIn profile. They're going to Google you. They're going to see if you're on Twitter, and they're going to start having a little poke around to see what you've been up to. So fair enough, you may not think that you've got a reputation which matters particularly, because whatever your circle of acquaintances or connections is. But the fact is, we all do. I mean, anyone who's going for a job now, they're going to get Googled. Any speaker who's going for a gig, somebody's going to Google them. They're going to check out their social media feeds and so on. It's just going to happen. It's just the way it is.
Well, with Facebook and Twitter and the ability to spout off anything at any given moment, what are some of the innocent ways people sometimes get themselves in trouble with their reputation online? Because they may post something and they may look at it and think, oh, this is innocuous, it's not a big deal, but it actually can hurt them.
Well, it may be innocuous to them, of course, but you never know what's going to offend somebody else. On the other hand, you can't go around trying not to offend anybody. I mean, that would be crazy. That would be dull as well. But what you need to bear in mind is that everything that you post is permanent. You may think that you can delete things, but there are ways people can find things, not very difficult ways. There's something called the Wayback Machine that stores a snapshot of the internet every few days. So things are permanent. And the thing about your posting, which you may think is innocuous, is it could be part of a pattern. And therefore, people could start to see what your opinion is. They could start to see what you're for and against. Now, you may be happy about that. Frankly, I'm quite happy about that. I'm very open about my opinions. And people know what they are. And if they don't want to work with me, that's fine. I don't want to work with them. But other people might think, well, I just need to be a bit circumspect. But the real thing that gets people is that they're not aware of who their audience is. They sometimes think when they post something, they're only posting to a small circle. But because they don't necessarily understand the privacy settings on Facebook or the fact that you're posting to a Twitter feed that everybody in the world can see, they think it's just a private message. Those are the people who really get themselves into trouble. They think they're posting privately, having a chat to 2 or 3 people, and all of a sudden, millions of people can see it.
Well, my guest today is Alan Stevens. He is calling in from across the pond. He is the media coach, not only in Europe, but also very well known here in the States as well. And that's where I met you. We got to meet actually in person before we kind of met online through the NSA.
Yeah.
And you are someone who really knows their stuff, not only just about reputation management, but also how to be that media savvy person in general, because it's a new world. Everybody is part of the media now. It's whether you want to be or not. Facebook can become part of the media. I watch the news here in America. I don't know if they do this like on the BBC, but a good portion of any news report is normal people's tweets about it afterwards.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all news creators. We're citizen journalists. We're people who create content, and you might think it's the news media being a bit desperate for reportage that they actually go to the Twitter feed, but really it's a good measure of what people are thinking about something. And that's what news is, basically.
I find it lazy because I don't want opinions. I want facts. That's what news is. Otherwise, I would watch the if it was a Bill O'Reilly type person who is an opinion person, that's his whole show is opinions.
Sure, that's right.
Perfect. But when I want to watch the 30 minutes of news and find out what's going on in the world, I don't really care about what somebody who is unrelated to the situation thinks about it.
I think it's fair enough, Craig, but unless, of course, it's representative of a groundswell of opinion. So if they're doing their job properly as journalists, we're journalists, then they will select a message which reflects popular opinion. I think in that case, that's a fair call. But I would agree, if they're taking random tweets and random Facebook messages and sticking them up on the screen to save writing editorial, that is lazy. Yeah,
well, I live in Texas, so sometimes those tweets are embarrassing, and often the overwhelming opinion of the culture can be a little off-putting.
Yes.
So let's talk about how we can build that reputation, because, like I said, a lot of us don't really understand that we actually have one, and so once we become aware and realize, well, now we have to be a little more thoughtful of what we're doing. We don't have to sit there and analyze every tweet for socio-political context, but we need to figure out a strategy to present ourselves to the world. How can we set that up where it's not only intimidating, but time-consuming?
Well, again, you don't need to spend a lot of time on social media, and people often, that's a fallacy that I think people have got hold of, that you need to be on social media all the time, every day. It's not the case. I mean, I work on social media a lot, but I'm only on there for about an hour and a half a day, if that, and some days barely at all. So it's about being strategic. It's about getting involved in certain debates. It's about being aware that you can't talk to all the people all the time. And really, a lot of it is about not responding. And I think a mistake that people sometimes make is they feel they have to get involved in every debate which they might have an interest in and express an opinion on. And sometimes I always say, stay your hand. Keep your hands away from that keyboard or that phone screen, because you can post in haste something that will do you permanent damage. And one thing that I advise my clients to do, I even do it myself, sometimes if I'm infuriated by something which I see online, I post a response or I type a response, and then I cancel it.
Yeah.
I don't actually post it. And I find that the mere act of typing the words out has made me feel better, and then think, actually, you're a bit of an idiot for posting that. Don't do it. So you can work your emotion out without actually getting involved in a debate. So it's sometimes the stuff that you don't post that enhances your reputation more effectively than the stuff that you do.
Yeah, I consistently wear out my delete key because and I will go through a whole paragraph before then I'm like, no, it's not worth it. Because you know me, I'm a little outspoken, especially when it comes to speakers and, like law of attraction and, when they...
Hey, we both are.
Right.
We're both in this boat, Craig.
Right. And so someone will say something that is completely not only stupid and insane, but the advice they're giving to the person can be damaging.
Yeah.
And so I want to say something, but before I hit enter, I see that there's like 15 other people that's backing this weird contention up. And it's like, you know what? I don't want to get into an argument. What can I say that's going to be of any value? Probably not, only because I'll get drowned out in certain instances. So I'll just back away.
And the other thing that I do, if I do get involved in a debate, I generally don't go more than 3 responses into a debate. Because you will find if people are just not listening or not prepared to listen. In fact, the only reason that a lot of us get into debates is just to have our say and wave our flag and say, this is what we think. We know we're not going to change somebody else's opinion, and we know we're just going to upset a bunch of people. So it's really, in essence, just us being a bit egotistical. So I'm as human as anybody else, I get involved in these debates, and sometimes I will post 2 or 3 things. After the third one, I'm out. So I'll leave it there.
Now, do you find that people will project onto you whatever you're typing, because it's a tweet or it's a post on Facebook's, and I will see a lot of people use the word hatred or vitriol or whatever, and you're like, I just posted a 4-word response that didn't agree with you, and there was no swear words, there was no, but you think there's vitriol and hatred.
People, and I'm often surprised. I shouldn't be surprised because I've been doing this now for 20 years. I shouldn't be surprised by people who post things online in hate or in haste or both. But there is a lot of that, and I think it's the impersonal nature of the web. It's anti-social media. It's the way that people feel they can say anything to somebody they don't know, and there's no consequence to it whatsoever. And of course there is. A lot of this can be very, very hurtful. There's an interesting thing around at the moment, a beauty blogger who's posting a video about her without makeup on, and the hatred which she's attracted is unbelievable. I was just discussing it with my daughter. It's absolutely extraordinary. And you think no one would dare to say that to somebody's face, surely. So I think there is a kind of unknowingness about what people post online. They can get a little bit carried away and so on. I always say step back, calm down, take a breath, walk away, go and do something else. It's really not as important as you think. But on the positive side, I think if you post your opinion with respect, with regularity, and offer some value, then you will build a positive reputation rather than being negative.
Yeah, you also build up credibility because they start to see the consistency in your message.
Yes, exactly that.
So how can we build that? So the first rule is don't post unless you absolutely need to.
First rule is don't post. Don't post in anger.
Right.
The second one is what I was saying there, that you need to be consistent and you need to be regular and you need to be respectful. You were saying there about not swearing in a post. There's never any need to get into swearing or vitriolic comment. You can respectfully disagree with anybody about anything, and that seems to me perfectly fair enough. They might kick off, they might get upset, but that's not your problem, that's theirs. So I would say you keep posting regularly, and also you stick to a few topics. And I think there is a danger in people wanting to get involved in everything. We can't be experts in 1,000 things. Both of us know as speakers involved in the speaking profession, you have a niche or a niche, as I believe you prefer to call it.
Yeah, as we've murdered the English language, or in this particular
well, you've got a different
French.
version, that's all.
Yeah.
You've just got a different version. Anyway, a small area which you own. And I think to stay within that most of the time, 80% of the time, stay within the area that you completely understand. That's absolutely fine. But you've got to be consistent within that, obviously. So you need to know what you think. Some of this stuff about forming a reputation is actually knowing what you think. And you'd be surprised how many people I talk to, and I say, "What do you really think about that?" And they say, "Oh, well, I'm not sure." And I say, "Well, if you're not sure, don't try and build a reputation online until you've figured it out."
So when we start to post, because you want to start spreading your knowledge around,
Yeah.
And you have to be strategic in where you do that. There's a fine line, or maybe it's not so fine a line. There's a fine line between offering up your opinion and offering up your perspective to help people and spamming. So, because I find some people use forums as their personal blog and advertising channel, and it can be rather annoying. So how can you walk the walk of I'm offering value, but yet I'm still going to try to promote myself?
Well, I think people overdo this, and I think you can promote yourself just by being you, and saying what you say. And I'm always a little bit upset with people who say, "Well, I have an opinion on this," and in chapter 3 of my book, I say this on page 17, and there isn't any need. There is no. It's obvious what's going on. I think what you can do is you can simply build a reputation by being knowledgeable and respectful about a topic, by engaging in debate, and not promoting anything that you do. People will get to know what you do, or they might ask what you do, and if they ask, it's fair enough to answer. But I personally, I don't feel there's ever a need. I mean, obviously, I'm English, and therefore I tend to be a little bit underplayed, and I don't go out there and talk about what I do all the time and say, "Hey, I'm the right guy for the job." That's not my style. But I think if you are ubiquitous, I mean, as you know Pam Lontos, I'm sure.
Sure, yeah, with PRPR.
Pam used to run a company called PRPR, sold it to Russell Trahan a few years ago, also a fine person. And Pam, for me, came up with a great phrase that summed up PR and also reputation management, and the phrase was, "I see your name everywhere." And I always credit Pam with that because I think that's genius, to come up with a phrase which sums up pretty much what PR is about and what reputation management is about.
Like I said, we don't understand our reach, and I've seen evidence that even the most innocent person who only has, well, maybe not the most innocent person, someone who only has maybe 100 or 200 followers can get into massive trouble just because it all takes is one retweet.
Oh, you bet. Plenty of examples of that, Craig.
Yeah, I was going to say there was a lady that was going to South Africa, and she tweeted something.
I was thinking of the same person.
Oh, okay. She tweeted something awful right before she got on the plane, and by the time she landed, she had been fired. She had been pretty much her career had been destroyed because one of her followers retweeted it, and because that follower had enough people, and a chain reaction happens.
That's right, and so that's an excellent case in point. I mean, even if you think you're in a private discussion, or in a private Facebook group, or even a secret Facebook group, somebody in there could pick up your message and they think they're so outraged by it that they're going to repost it. That's what happened in her case. And you're right, so she was a trending hashtag by the time she landed in South Africa without any awareness at all of what was going on. And that was a couple of years ago now. She's still recovering from that. I think she's probably written a book about it by now.
Yeah, because I think we get a lot of mixed messages about reputation, because we'll see somebody or an organization, and I'll bring up one that you're very familiar with FIFA, who their reputation has been awful. No, it has been absolutely awful for 20 to 25 years. If I know their reputation is bad, then that's bad, because I don't know anything about them other than the leader of them had a really bizarre name, and they would...
Sepp Blatter.
Sepp Blatter, yep. Sounds like a condition.
Yes, it does.
And anytime they announced who the next venue was going to be, half the time you go, oh, the fix was in, because it's going to be in Qatar, where it's going to be 900 degrees to play the World Cup. And then other times it'd be a country that can't afford it, but somehow raise the money. They did this with the Olympics with Salt Lake City, where I'm much more familiar with, where they bribed people. And you kind of think the Olympic Committee is also a large organization that's kind of crooked. But yet their reputation somehow remains basically untarnished for a long time. How can you reconcile that you see these big organizations act weaselly and get away with it, and this poor lady makes one mistake probably in her whole entire life? She probably made a goofy joke that isn't even that funny, but she didn't think it was going to happen, and she is destroyed. So how can you reconcile the two?
I could probably reconcile that in 2 words, Craig: expensive lawyers. There are people who are very, very nervous about making remarks about large, or allegations about large organisations, FIFA or FIFA, as we call it over here in Europe. For many, many years, people have had their suspicions, and in fact, there have been some people actually have admitted and been into court for bribery in the past. We don't yet know, because it's not yet proven, whether the World Cup that was awarded to Qatar and to Russia was awarded corruptly. That's still under debate. It's still sub judice. But it's very, very difficult to start making allegations against large organizations because those guys have more money than you do, and they can afford better lawyers than you can. And quite often we get the justice we can afford, not the justice we deserve. So I think that's why individuals suffer rather than organizations.
Because I was going to say it's reputation. So a lot of times reputation is not fact-based. It's perception-based.
Well, no, that's true. It's often not. That's right. It is perceptual. But nevertheless, if somebody can stop somebody simply saying something about them, we've had cases, I'm sure you've had cases in America as well. We've certainly had cases here in the UK on Twitter where people have taken out a court injunction to prevent anyone even discussing what was said on Twitter about them. So the media aren't allowed to report, bloggers aren't allowed to blog, people aren't allowed to tweet about it, otherwise they're going to get prosecuted. Of course, you can't keep a lid on stuff for that long. And eventually the truth or the allegation will come out. But there are ways that the rich and powerful can keep these things out. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any means, as you know, because we've discussed this sort of stuff before.
You're one of the most practical. I mean, this is why I love talking to you, because in my heart, I believe that I should have been a British speaker, because when I talk to you and I talk to, Graham Davies, when I talk to you guys have the same kind of disposition and perspective that I have, and it's kind of not really happy. The Americans aren't really happy about that because they're really all about sunshine and what I call unicorn farts and rainbows. and when I come from a practical thing, I only hear it from European speakers, which is why I was like, so that down to earth perspective, I know you're not a conspiracy theorist.
No, I'm no far from that. But I do know how the world works. I've been working in journalism for 40 years and reputation management almost as long. I know how this stuff works. Nevertheless, a bad reputation can turn very quickly. It can turn in 5 minutes. So if you do something that goes really badly wrong, a good example would be the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, where Tony Hayward, the CEO of British Petroleum, a company which is global, was standing on a beach overlooking the Mexican Gulf and said to reporters, well, actually, I want my life back. Now, that's not a very sympathetic phrase when he's surrounded by fishing boats that can't put to sea because his oil is polluting the ocean. He lost his job.
And deservedly so. And my favorite part about that whole BP spill was that as that's going on, they haven't even plugged the hole. So it's still spewing out because of a certain, I guess the way the pipes were built and there were safety things that they're ignored. He was lobbying in Canada to do the exact same thing as the oil is spilling out. And he's sitting there, well, we need this to get waived so we can build it. And it's not a safety problem. And yet there's the biggest example of why you need these safety procedures in place is going on as he speaks. It was very weaselly, as we call here in the States.
It was. Weaselly is a good word for it. I'm going to start using that word, weaselly. But interestingly, it goes to show the lie of the wisdom of crowds, because they had 1,000 PR people working inside the company. And it seems to me if you've got 1,000 PR people working on a project, at least one of them is going to come up with the right idea. But none of them did.
So let's bring this from the macro to the micro, because we're talking about these big, huge corporations, which are, they really get hit because so many people will be coming and talking and retweeting and discussing the situation, because what they do affects thousands, if not millions of people sometimes. But little old me who just runs a small business out of his home, what kind of things do I need to do if something happens? I mean, what's the most common way my reputation can get tarnished at this level, and how can I fix that?
Well, the most common way that a sole trader or a small business can get their reputation tarnished is if somebody lies about them, or if somebody has a complaint which they feel hasn't been resolved properly, even though you may have acted perfectly rightly. So the important thing there is to get the truth out there. It can be quite difficult because sometimes the person who's made the original complaint will have got a lot of press coverage. I mean, I know somebody who was effectively libeled in the press on the front page of a national newspaper, and the apology eventually appeared on page 17 in a tiny paragraph at the bottom. The story was completely and utterly untrue. but very, very difficult to recover from. But to answer your question, if you've had something happen to you, and it's usually a disgruntled customer or client, then the best thing to do is to try and resolve it with them directly, rather than go public. It's much better to try and resolve it through some kind of mediation process. If you can't talk to them directly, or if you can talk to them directly, you usually find that if you resolve their complaint, they will calm down and they'll actually become a fan. So my advice, again, would be to keep it away from the online media. One thing that is a huge, huge error, and we see this from time to time, is to start an online argument. And we've all seen this where hotel owners or restaurateurs around the world will have a guest who complains on the Facebook page, and they will then take them on their Facebook page. And that's, I don't know if you ever, at your school, they ever had fights in the playground. But at my school, when we had fights in the playground, a huge crowd gathered in no time at all.
Oh, sure. It was
to watch what was happening. That's exactly what happens online.
It's like Fight Club. It's just everybody kind of walks around and they
exactly
cheer and they wait to see some poor little kid get the snot beat out of them.
Look, there's a fight. Let's go and watch. And as soon as that starts online, as soon as somebody starts an online debate with a disgruntled customer, that will build you a following in no time at all.
So is
It's not what you want.
there an equivalent of the teacher coming in and rescuing you? Like, because you, in that analogy, one of the ways that you usually get saved is the teacher comes and they all go, "Cheese it, it's the cops," and everybody runs away, and then all they remember is that moment, and it goes away. Can you? I don't know. Can you just withstand a storm and let it just kind of pass, or do you have to be a lot more proactive?
Well, that's a very good point, Craig, because quite often when I work a lot with clients managing the crisis in the media, sometimes I say, look, let's just ride this one out. Let's let it go, because something else will come down the line in half an hour or 2 hours or tomorrow, and people will forget. So you've got to think, is it worth responding? It's like if you read something in the newspaper about you that's not true, you think, is it actually worth getting in touch with the editor and correcting that? Or should I just let it go? And so that's the first call. Do you address it or do you not? If there's something factually incorrect, then you can challenge that. And you can have it withdrawn and you can receive an apology for that, and that's right and proper. But if it's an opinion, you're on much more difficult ground.
Yeah, because it's freedom of expression here. You have the First Amendment in America, where you can pretty much say anything you want if you make it an opinion. If you present it as fact, then that's where you get libel and all this other situation.
Exactly that. Yes.
So, what is the one thing? Because I only have a couple more questions because we're very precious on this international call. I know you're calling at what I would believe is supper time. Is that the correct term?
It's probably about 3:00 in the morning here now.
It is not 3:00 in the morning. Don't make them. I would never make you get up at 3:00 in the morning.
No, it's not. Supper time. What a lovely expression, Craig. Yes, it's nearly time for tea. I've got a cake stand here, and I've got Earl Grey tea.
I'm trying to figure out your schedule.
And my butler is actually folding the napkins at the moment.
Yeah, no, I
will need to go.
I'm trying to figure out what your schedule is. Is your flat a nice place, so you have to leave for the evening and go out? You got to go down to the West End. I'm using every British expression I can use besides calling you the doctor. I didn't go that far.
No, you didn't. It did. Well, the answer is that my wife's away on a course at the moment. My daughter's just turned 18, and we're probably going to go down to the pub and have a drink. And I know she can't do that in America, but here you can.
No, you're right. No. It depends on the state law. If you are present, so your parents. If you were there, you can buy her a drink. I know in Texas this is how it works, but Texas is weird. You can buy her a drink, and you can drink it. She can drink it in front of you.
Oh, well, okay. Well, she's not listening, so we're okay.
Yeah. So now she'll be harassing you the entire time you're in D.C. The last question I wanted to ask you is, we've got some things that we want to do on a regular basis to manage your reputation. When things go wrong, it's to be as proactive as possible. But is it ever good to go third party when it comes to interacting with folks? I know a lot of people automatically cease and desist orders. They head to the lawyer. Maybe that's Americans' way of seeing things. But, is going to the lawyer as quick as possible always a good thing, or can it be very detrimental?
It can be very detrimental. I wouldn't say it's always a good thing. I'd say it's occasionally appropriate. It depends on how much damage you feel has been done to your reputation and whether it's transient or permanent. So I think you really need to get some advice first. You might take some advice from a lawyer, or I would take advice from a mediator more often, because they tend to be people who want to resolve disputes rather than make money from litigation. So I would tend to, I'd take my own view on it. I'd talk to friends. I would then perhaps talk to a mediator, and then I might take it to law. But be aware that if you take it to law, you're always up against somebody who may have more money than you. It was. I think it was William Randolph Hearst who said, "Never pick an argument with somebody who buys printer ink by the barrel." So you need to be very aware of the resources you're up against.
Well, I know besides seeing you in DC this upcoming week, where can people find you and learn more about what you do?
People can find me at mediacoach, that's all one word, .co.uk, or if they can't remember that, then I've also alanstevens.net, which takes you to exactly the same place. And because I'm known as the Media Coach, I'm Media Coach on Twitter, I'm Media Coach on Facebook, and surprise, surprise, I'm Alan Stevens on LinkedIn.
And you also have a weekly radio show / podcast, right?
I do. I have a weekly web radio show known as The Media Coach. You can find that on iTunes. And I have a weekly email newsletter that's been going out every week. It's free. They're all free. I just, the spirit of love fills my soul. I just give things away. And that goes out every week, and you can sign up for that on my website.
Must be that healthcare that you have that influences your generosity.
Oh, indeed. The National Health Service. Let's not get into that. Okay.
Well, I can't wait to see you in D.C., and we're going to sit down and have a wonderful dinner together with our wives, the Heathers. And
the Heathers, we're both married to Heather, but different ones. Yeah, that's right.
Blonde Heathers, beautiful blonde Heathers that we both have. So,
indeed.
Alan, I can't wait to see you. Thanks for coming on the show.
Huge pleasure, Craig. Thank you very much.
That's the show. Thanks again to Alan for talking with me. He did not get up at 3 a.m. You can follow the show at Reality Check Pod on Twitter, like the Facebook page, and if you have any guest suggestions, comments, or questions, email Craig at speakercraigprice.com. See you in D.C.